Good evening. I'd like to call the Board of Finance regular meeting of Monday, March 19th, 2018 to order. First item on the agenda is public forum. Not seeing any public forum or hearing anyone. Number 2 on the agenda, approve minutes of, we're going to take these individually. There's 3 sets of minutes. The first one is the 2.1 regular meeting minutes of February 15th, 2018. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Discussion, corrections, comments?
I had one revision on page 2.
Go ahead, Joe.
Item 3.1, where it says Mr. Gammerman asked why the district-wide. I think it was weather. That was my only.
What?
It should instead of saying why, you ask whether they could have been combined into one project.
That makes sense.
Yeah, well, I would add another word, Jeff.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Gammerman.
No, I'll take the one word, thank you, and I'll add a word. And Cox could not have been combined into the project.
Okay.
Not could have been combined, but could not have been combined.
That question will be addressed later in the meeting. I think I had a couple as well. Does anybody have anything else? Page 3, item number 4 in the large paragraph, the second one that starts about the 4th line down. I believe it should say both, just for clarification purposes, both bids were substantial increases. And then it continues to read, but they were not surprised since the current vendor's price was well below market, and then I would add after market, over the course of the past 5 years, because they were trying to get a foothold in the area.
Over the course of what, Mike? The past 5 years.
Over the past 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And later on down page 3, in the line that states, it was noted that a lot in building and grounds is encumbered, and most of the site improvements line was spent on unanticipated projects, I believe, as opposed to anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one typo on page 5. It's just under expenditures, second paragraph, second sentence, Ms. Malvesi explained that this is mainly due to blanket encumbrances. Any further discussion?
Move their acceptance.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Yeah, let's go 2.2, budget public hearing minutes of March 6, 2018. And
Move we approve.
second, okay. For discussion, corrections. I had on page 3 only, and I don't remember how she stated it, but just because I know of her, I think it's the second paragraph, Lorna Romero. I don't know if she said Romero or Steele, but
She did say Romero.
She did say Romero? Okay. All right. And on the top of page 4, again, I think it's just for clarification, he added that they started with pre-K and elementary in the high school, and this year they have incorporated the middle school.
Where are you?
On top of page 4, first paragraph.
Last line.
Last line, yeah.
Okay.
It was just kind of like, it was left out there, they have the middle school. They have incorporated the middle school. I believe that's all I have. Anybody else?
I had something.
Go ahead, Ken.
On the bottom of page 3, Scammon asked if there are other needs areas to extend our internal special education capabilities so that we may be able to reduce our outstanding, our outsourcing activities. What I was concerned with was whether they could extend special education into other areas that are possible.
Could you repeat that one more
Yeah,
time?
Mr. Chairman asked if there are other needs areas in which we may be able to extend our internal special education capabilities so we can reduce our outsourcing activities.
Thank you. Okay. Anything further? Okay, all in favor, as corrected? Aye. Opposed? Okay. And finally, 2.3, budget workshop minutes of March 8th, 2018. Move to.
Move to be approved?
Second. Okay.
Again, I had a restructuring here.
Sure, go with page
On
2.
page 2, Mr. Chairman asked what areas of reduction the BOE would consider if the Board of Finance requested additional cuts. And then that makes Dr. Freeman's response more pertinent.
Mm-hmm. I actually, right below that, in that next paragraph, I think it was an important piece that was mentioned, because it says Dr. Freeman said that they would have to look at the new pieces first. Before that, though, I think it's important to note that he did say, and I'll try to do this a little bit slow, Dr. Freeman stated that ultimately the Board of Ed would need to meet and make those determinations. But he suggested, and then they would have to look at the new pieces first. I think it's important to note that the Board of Ed would make those decisions. That would not be coming from Dr. Freeman. And on page 4, I'm not exactly sure how this would show, but on the first full paragraph, fourth line, where it says payment from fund balance to cover the ARC for the Board of Education. I know that's an ARC payment. I'm thinking that should be capitalized ARC. Is that correct? ARC payment?
Yes.
I think if anybody was reading these, if you cover the ARC, what ARC? It's the ARC payment for the pension. Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? And I don't think we've had any abstentions or anything else. So, item number, let's see.
Standing
We'll go
Building
with correspondence. 3.1, Standing Building Committee minutes. We have 2 in our packets of February 6th, February 15th, which is a special meeting, and today I believe all of us hopefully had a chance to either review or print out the March 6th Standing Building Committee meeting minutes. I did have a chance to look at all of them. I believe I reported on February 6th, and there were some questions. In fact, the question that was by one of our board members, I think it was Mr. Gammerman, I had asked and was reflected in the March 6th draft meeting minutes that were received today about the electrical district-wide wiring and electrical upgrades.
Right.
So I'm just going to, very quickly on the March, for those that didn't have a chance to review them, there was action on the district-wide wiring upgrades, with the low bids being recommended for cabling and network equipment at, well, it's district-wide, so it's all the schools. Baldwin Middle School windows and doors, the schedule for work this summer was provided to the committee. Melissa Jones Roof Project went out to bid last Tuesday, which was March 13th. HVAC upgrades at Baldwin and Jones, the RFP is being developed for that, and that project is for next year. Update on electrical updates at Baldwin and Cox schools was given. There was an update on the performance contracting. with an introduction to the team and a list of primary projects that they're working on. And there was one other item here. Community Center roof project. There was some discussion on that regarding it going out to bid. I know that there was a special meeting regarding that project, and there was a particular issue with the specifications on the gutters that needed to be corrected, and the building committee had that change made. So that kind of reflects what was going on in the February special meeting.
Are we on March now?
We are in March. Any questions or comments on the March meeting minutes, or any of the ones we received, actually?
Well, actually, in March, they have voted to approve two vendors, JKS Systems on the first part on cabling, and CDW Government for the network equipment.
Right.
And I don't believe there were any competitive bids. Do we know why?
There were.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
There were competitive bids. They were attached to the summary the Board of Selectmen had this morning when we voted to approve the award of the contract to those two suppliers. There were 3 or 4 bidders for those two projects.
Yeah, there was a bid summary sheet.
There was actually 13 bidders at the pre-bid conference.
At the conference.
At the pre-bid conference.
And then there were like 3
or 4.
That's very typical, yeah.
They're very high on those two contractors.
They seem to be comfortable with it.
Yes.
Yeah, and we've had a history with those two.
Right, and one thing should be noted for the board's understanding is that there will be a reimbursement from the federal E-rate program for those services in the amount of about 40%.
Okay.
So the net cost will be $28,000 less than the $70,000 that's quoted there.
Oh, great.
So at the end it says 500,000 in guaranteed rebates, so that's approximately,
That's the energy performance contract.
okay.
Anything else in March?
Do we similarly have competitive bidding on the Melissa Jones roof project, Matt? Do you know?
I don't know.
Because they're opening the bids, they opened the bids on March 13th.
They
and
went.
they're going to, no, they received the bids on March 13th. They're opening them on the 29th.
They were going out to bid on March 13th.
Yeah,
The
they're
bid
going-
opening is on
29th.
the 29th.
Okay.
Right.
So when we see the April minutes, we'll see where they are.
That is correct. We'll see if I can make that one. I like those guys. I like to visit them. Go ahead, Matt.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on to standing building, this morning the Board of Selectmen appointed Dave DeMayo, the president of Munger Construction, to the Standing Building Committee, and for the first time in many years, that committee now is fully staffed. So,
That's good.
That's great.
That's wonderful.
Because if there's anything you need is a full committee with the expertise on that committee. So
That's right.
That's great to hear. Okay. If nothing more on standing building.
How about that?
Oh, you go. I'm sorry, Ken. Go ahead.
Yeah. Item 12 is on possible action updating performance contracting. And apparently, they're going to begin working on performance contracting this summer.
they already started.
They already started. And we have 500,000 guaranteed rebates.
It's part of the original package. The original proposal included those, and part of the cost-benefit analysis included those rebates.
So when does the town realize those rebates?
I'm not sure exactly when the rebates kick in, but
Huh?
I think it's once the projects are.
once
motion.
projects are
Wait.
completed.
And the projects are very wide-ranging, the first ones they listed here, so
Yes, they are.
they're all over the place. But they all seem to be priority based on things that have happened over the last few months, so. It's good.
Has there been any update with regard to the turf, the seams in the turf field?
I have not heard of anything, no. If,
The minutes say that they're going back to the contractor to see what they're going to do to remedy the situation.
right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah?
Sorry to dominate your meeting.
cannot-
If you have the information, feel.
At the meetings, at the Board of Selectmen meeting this morning, Board of Selectmen voted to approve expenditure of $40,000 to secure the services of Castle Booz, I guess it is Castle Booz engineering firm, to be an owner's rep in determining the cause of the problem. The Standing Building Committee, Rick Maynard and Jeff D'Onofrio, our attorney, interviewed 3 firms with the intention. The intention here is for us to have a representative, to have our own findings of what the underlying problems are. There are potentially 3 places for failure: the provider of the materials themselves, the installer, and the design component of the field. So there had been, shall we say, less than enthusiastic efforts to try to determine who was at fault among the 3 of them. There was appearing to be a little bit of finger pointing, and we have decided to protect our interests, go out and hire Castle Booz. We fully anticipate that if it turns out to be the fault of one of these 3 providers, we would be able to recover those costs through the warranty process. This is not the end. The $40,000 is to develop a report to determine who is in fact, where the failure occurred and who is responsible for the failure.
How were Castle Booz selected from, and how were they selected?
There were interviews conducted by Paul,
Okay.
Rick Maynard, and Jeff D'Onofrio.
Okay.
2, Castle Booz was the only local one. There was one from Kentucky and one from, where's the other? Somewhere else in the Midwest.
Okay.
Is there any rough estimate as to
No.
what it may cost?
No,
Yeah.
No numbers?
no.
It could be, yeah, it could be so wide ranging, I wouldn't even want to speculate.
It could range from repairs to the materials that are directly affected to the whole field having to be torn up and rebuilt.
Right.
It's bigger than the breadbasket, that's for sure.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for the
You're
update.
welcome.
Appreciate it. All right. Anything else on standing building? Okay. Pension committee.
Chairman, I'd like to just make
Yes.
a comment regarding.
Sure, go
You'll see an additional report in your packet this month. It's in response to Jonathan's request for performance evaluation. The committee chose to provide you on a quarterly basis with the information we receive from our professionals instead of me reinventing the wheel on my own. So you will see that report quarterly after the Pension Commission committee has reviewed it first.
Great.
Hopefully that meets what you were looking for.
Yes, very much.
In fact, I did want to mention that, that during the finance director's report in the meeting, there was just, pretty substantial discussion about what we had requested. So, so this is definitely great, and it looks like we went up about 2.25 month to month. Am I correct in that? I believe.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have it open.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I just looked at it. There was about a 2.25 increase in funds, in the balance. So now that we have this report, we could take a look at it, and then when we get it, so this is quarterly, Mary Jane?
Correct.
Okay, so the next one.
So that's as of the end of December.
As of December
I believe.
31st? So will we get another one next month? For the April meeting, or is it a little bit delayed?
You may get it in May because
In May.
the pension committee meets 2 days after you.
That's fine.
So
Right.
I don't
So-
like to present something to you that I have not presented
No,
to
they
them.
said they wanted to review it first, so that's fair. Fine. Thank you. Anything else on the pension committee? If not, we'll go on to review and approve expenditures for the town government for February 2018.
Okay. Revenue or expenditure?
Starting with revenues, it's the first thing on your iPad. First thing I would like to note that there is a typo under town clerk for the percent collected as of last year to 2817 should be 78.3 instead of 8.3, but the corresponding numbers at the bottom are correct. Staying on that line, I will note that the town clerk does look like it's bringing in less percentage compared to last year at this time, but she is on target based on this year's budget and how we have budgeted for her. We are 66.7 through the year. She's at 62.4. So based on her budget, even though it looks lower than last year, she is right on track. A couple other things. Natural resources is down, although it's not a large budget. I did speak to Kevin McGee, and they have fewer applications this year than they've had, and those applications are for much smaller projects, so that is making a difference in their revenue this year. Fire department, as usual, is a month behind. They are looking quite low. We're no longer being reimbursed for Medicare supplement. The reason we're given is that Medicare is supposedly paying more. It's supposed to balance out to our revenue. We're not seeing that at this point, so we'll be watching that closely at this time. But that's the reason we're seeing that lower.
A question about that.
Mm-hmm.
When you looked at last year, we were down, I think we're down more this year than we were last year. Is that because of the Medicare?
Last year we were down about 33,000 because of this issue with Medicare, and now they haven't reimbursed us anything, so we're down a little bit lower.
Lower,
so,
yeah.
Correct. Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Is there a sense as to how the timing of those payments works? I mean, do we have any, will it come in, if there's a reimbursement from Medicare, will it come in during this fiscal year? Will it come in July or August or something?
Well, if it comes in July and August for this fiscal year, we do accrue it back.
Okay.
So we will see that catch up.
Okay, great, thanks.
I have another question on revenue.
Go ahead.
On the tax collection, we're very healthy on tax collection. Just wondered whether you could project where we may go.
I'll be starting to do some projections after the end of this month. We are 75% 75,000 more collected than we've budgeted, but we are entering our slower season. When our revenues start to slow down at this point. So I don't have an answer for you this month, but I'm hoping next month to have an overall projection of where we think we will be for the year end.
Great.
Good, thank you.
I had a question on social services.
Mm-hmm.
For negative $225.
We don't budget. We don't have a budget for social services because the money. To be honest, I'm not. I can't tell you what that's for. So some years we get small dollars in, and some years we don't. So we typically don't budget for that. I can look that up to see what.
It says fuel assistance?
Yeah, but I don't know.
I thought it was a donation.
It could be just a donation, but I don't know that specifically. And in the fuel assistance line, possibly, but I can't tell you that for sure.
Anything else on revenues? Shall we go to expenditures?
Guys, one quick question.
Go ahead.
How come the finance line is doing so well?
That's your interest.
You've already gotten into some higher interest return, right?
Correct, because it's important to note that our money is making interest. The STIF account is at about 1.47 at this point. So we
It
are.
is a stiff?
Yeah.
That could be what.
And the rest of our money was approximately 0.8. So we are. All of our money is bringing in interest. The issue is whether we could make that even more.
Maybe that's going to be bigger.
Correct.
That's great.
Correct.
All right.
Okay. So expenditures.
Expenditures, again, we are 66.7% through the year. Town government is 77.2% expended compared to 81.7 last year. All of the departments are pretty well on track at this time. There are a couple that I've spoken about in prior months that I wasn't going to discuss again. I will just note, if you look at the debt retirement interest, it appears we are over budget by $735,000, but if you look at the detail, you will see that we had anticipated bringing in some of the premiums that were received on our bonding that we had set aside in our fund balance, and we have a revenue source from there. So that's the money we will be bringing in at the end of the year. And it's actually a little less. We had anticipated an amount for the last bond for the high school. Of course, we give an estimate based on what we think the interest rates might be, and we saved $11,000 based on what the actual amount is. So the $735,000 is what we'll be transferring from fund balance, which we have assigned to debt.
Very good.
Any other questions?
Anything else on expenditures? Yeah, I mean, I noticed that all the departments seem to be
Right on line,
Right on-
yes, doing
right on
very
line.
well.
There's one item that
Yes.
I will make a caution. Engineering and Public Works, our overtime line is probably going to be under by the time we get done with the March storms and potentially one coming this week. As you can take a look at that overtime line, we're at 88% expended, and that is through February.
Are any of those storms FEMA?
Not at this point.
Not this one?
But as usual, they find it someplace else. The departments have all been usually,
It gets tougher and tougher to do when you continue to erode the non-salary and employee benefits line items.
In Human Services, there's one item for Community Health Care Center. Each of the agencies gets a contribution from the town, and there's $1,000 to the Community Health Center that still is available. Is there a reason that they haven't
They
received the
probably
funds?
just haven't requested it yet.
Okay.
Some of the agencies have different timings
Okay.
for when they seek their donations. So I can check with them to be sure that goes out.
Okay.
They will all be
No,
going out
no doubt
before the
about
end of the
that.
year. Mhm.
Just a general question. Since we've gotten a series of late storms, including one that's coming, that will still be March. This is carrying us through February. We have any idea where this is? I think you were alluding to it, Matt, but where is this going to go? Like, if we were to look forward and see where we are in engineering
I can tell
as
you
of
with the
the end
three.
of
I
March.
can tell you with the three storms we've had over the past month, we will go over the allocated amount for overtime.
Anything else? Any other area in there other than overtime?
At this point, no. You see, there's a large encumbrance for equipment repair and maintenance. That's traditionally an area where we can go to overcome a deficit in the overtime budget. And then there's always the opportunity to go to summer road maintenance.
Yeah, the roads are getting chewed up by this.
Well, they are, but question of priorities on where we apply the money.
In the building line, there's contracted services is running high. Is there any?
Correct. I made note of that one meeting before
My
where,
apologies.
that's okay. We have some additional work that's being done by our contractor, and if you look on the revenue line, you'll see an offsetting increase in the revenue, which is covering that expense.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything further on expenditures before we go to warrants?
Warrants.
Warrants. Would you like to kick it off, Ken?
It almost feels like we're looking at old business. I can see in the warrants that if we look on pages 30, 31, on general warrants, you've got tree removal.
Yeah.
That's got to be old business, very old business, I would think. Wonder where that's going.
Well, the invoice
This is
dates
as of
from
the end of February.
Yeah.
Tree removal will be another line that we will have some significant difficulties with based on the last 2 storms.
Yeah, I actually anticipated that question, but was unable to reach them before they left for the day, because I was doing this a little bit too late this evening. So,
How much had they spent to date, considering these February invoices?
hold on, I'll have to go back to
I
expense
think this was
report.
4,000 to 5,000 just in that month.
Yeah, it was actually more like 12.
Was it?
Yeah, if you put,
Tree removal?
I'm looking on 29. There was tree removal, Great Hill, Fitch Hill, South Hoop Hole,
One by the golf course, too.
bunch in Little Meadow, Sawmill.
Yeah, the golf course had some in their budget as well. The tree maintenance line has a budget of 85,000, of which we've expended 51,000 already, as of the end of February.
As of the end of February.
As of the end of February.
Which means more to come.
Assigned 2 requisitions in for several $1,000s this week.
I was going to say there's got to be
Each.
Right, there's,
a bunch more coming.
Several thousand each.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
We hired 2 contractors for the storm, the second storm, for better part of 2 days, was it? Yeah. 2 crews.
what typically would happen in a line such as this is that they would do the emergency storm work, and maybe some other trees that they had tagged for removal may or may not get done in this fiscal year, so that they can work within their budget.
We also had a tree at the corner of Goose Lane and Nut Plains that required the use of a crane to remove it. So that was a pretty expensive proposition as well.
Along that lines, though, supplies for the public works, sand, salt, they got to be close to using everything they have. We're purchasing more? Can we still get more?
We can still get more. We have supplies.
Yeah, that's what brought it to my attention. But when we purchase more, are we still able to get the state bid price?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, we have a minimum that we have to purchase, but we can purchase as much as we need off that price.
Yeah, seeing that we're at 98%. Road maintenance, winter.
That includes almost $21,000 encumbrance.
Yeah, right.
Look who's here.
Further warrants. Weekly, special fund.
Yeah,
You want to stay in the general?
yeah, I have a couple on the general.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
The animal shelter, $4,800 cleaning services. What is that for the year? What?
Page 49?
Yeah, these are just the invoices that came in. For that alone,
There's a service contract.
Yeah,
what is the service contract?
That's a monthly cost of $2,400, so that you're seeing 2 months
2
being
months,
paid
yeah.
for 48.
So that's a service contract that covers
Correct.
everything. That's a 12-month contract.
Actually, I have a question on special fund. Just a curiosity, on the Long Hill project.
Yes.
just because I don't have the information right in front of me, and we've gotten the reports before as far as how much is remaining. Do you know where we stand on the contract for Long Hill? How much, percentage-wise even, complete?
I don't have
Just
that
wondering what
information.
balance.
I don't have that information with me. I plan to do that at next month.
For next month?
Quarterly.
Okay.
Because I reported as of
Right.
the end of
Oh,
December, so
okay.
I plan to report again at the end of
I mean, none of
March.
these were really, there weren't any big ones. They were more, it looks like more to the design team. There was a $80,000 one for the contractor, but.
Those are inspection fees.
Yeah, they're inspection fees, so
Right.
they're not anything, not big amounts, but I was just wondering where
Right.
they're lessening, so I was
And
wondering.
the
how
fact
much
that you're
more.
seeing all the inspection fees coming through means we are at the end, towards the end of the project, because that's when
Exactly.
the inspections.
Right.
We did have a summary through December 31st.
Correct,
Mhm.
And this
Yeah.
is what it tells
So
us.
we'll get an update next month.
Yeah.
correct. Next
Great.
month, I had planned to do them quarterly, Ken, so you'll see one next month.
Great.
We're winding down.
We are.
Okay. Any further on warrants? Go ahead.
On the weekly warrants, there's an item to the town of North Haven for special weapons and tactics. Is that like an annual contribution we make to them? I think it was $3,000.
I think that was a training fee,
Okay.
if I remember correctly. Does it say training line? I don't know.
It doesn't, I'm looking at
Yeah,
page
it's
1 of the weekly warrant. It's about halfway down. On the, right here,
Town of North Haven.
town of North Haven,
Oh,
right below that.
yeah.
It's under operating supplies.
Right, operating supplies. I'm not sure. I could check on that for you.
Okay, if you would, thanks.
Shipman and Goodwin, general legal expense for Bank of America lease. Are we,
That was our cost for going through the lease project for the energy performance contract.
so Shipman did it instead of Dave Pitney?
Correct. We
Okay.
now contract with Shipman and Goodman.
There's an item that caught my eye in the general, on page 62, hazmat, waste disposal, figure of over $14,000. Is that
Could you tell me what page again?
page 62?
of
The big one.
the big one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a contract, well, that's our household hazardous waste removal contract. So that was from July through December, so that's 6 months worth of expense for that.
That's a fixed sum.
It's not, it's a fixed cost, not necessarily a total fixed sum.
It's not a fixed fee, but it's dependent on how much they
Correct.
receive and how much they have
Correct.
to dispose.
Exactly, depending on what we have to dispose. But
More
it's
of a
a fixed
materials
fee,
Billed semi-annual.
I would assume, since this was 6 months, yes.
Good for you.
Logical.
Do you expect that to change, given the change in the hazmat materials? That's it.
Yes, because that did include oil disposal, so that cost should go away for that portion of it.
You've got all the answers today.
Every once in a while.
We ready? Should we move over to, if nothing else on warrants, to medical? The updated medical?
Updated medical, I'm glad you all have it.
Yeah.
So our February expenses went up ever so slightly, not too much, still putting us way ahead of anticipated claims for the year. March was the first time we had a big bump last year, so maybe we will see that again. Admin is running pretty close to where we had expected, but the claims are where we're seeing our biggest shift. Catastrophic claims jumped, doubled this past month. Of course, we're only seeing through January, so we're now at 428,000 of the 1.2 million that we have as our premium. On the revenue side, that is tracking just about right at budget, slightly higher. But overall, we are still showing an estimated fund balance of almost $4.2 million.
Okay. Mr. Chairman? Share with you a document that we received from our insurance consultant related to the discussion we had last week related to where we should fall related to the stop loss and the premium. Draw your attention to page 2. There's a table in there that shows the 5-year history of our performance. Stop loss has produced a rather significant return of nearly $2.1 million we've saved as a result of having the stop loss in place. I want to remind you of a comment I made, not once, but I think twice during the past couple of discussions, that taking a 1-year snapshot is a dangerous thing to do. Yes, right now we are paying more for the stop loss insurance than we are receiving in terms of benefit. However, this only reflects 7 months worth of data, and we anticipate, I think it just doubled this past month, and you'll see some additional documentation in here. There are 6 claims that are currently over $100,000. So I would urge some level of caution related to making any changes in the assumptions or any changes in the stop loss insurance based on a 1-year, which is not a complete 1-year trend. So I suggest you, at your leisure, read through the balance of this, right, and we'll make sure Ken gets a copy as well.
Okay.
It reminds me of back in my days of serving on the condominium association board, trying to decide whether we're going to go by a per storm contract or a per snowfall contract.
That's right.
And it seemed no matter which year we chose,
Right.
it was the wrong year.
Right, and for years, the Board of Selectmen wrangled with exactly the same thing on the town side as buying snow insurance.
It's like contracting for heating oil or going spot market. I never get that right at home either.
You know, I wonder how difficult it would be, but what if we looked at a table that had more of the options?
We certainly can.
Yeah, maybe see if there was a better track. But I agree 100% that you just can't look at it in with 1 year. You got to look across the averages.
And the consultant talks to some of the alternatives. If we went back to a $250,000 or $225,000 stop loss number, which would lower our premiums, obviously, and what the potential impact of that is. So some of that is discussed in this document.
Right, you might not see it in the table, but it might be in the body of the
Right.
letter.
Like my associate has said here, it's not an easy forecast.
No.
It's not a perfect science.
Oh, this is great. Thank you for this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank our agent, too.
Pardon?
Thank our agent, too, for putting this.
Well, yes, they earned their keep this past week.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Let's see. Anything else for the town? I think we covered everything. Except for building permits, which I saw that falls under committee report, so I'm gonna go by the committee report now. So.
Yes, that's not really my report. It just kind of fell under there.
We're gonna take that off.
Yeah.
Downside.
So my other items are later on in the agenda. I'll come
Okay,
back.
that sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, if nothing else, yep, do we have a motion to approve expenditures for the town government for February 2018 of $3,918,655?
So moved.
Wait a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions or recusals? Okay. And I believe that we can go on to the next item, which is review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for February 2018. You made it. Coming straight from another meeting.
Yes.
Thank you for
allowing us to come a little late.
Oh,
I voted just as I was putting my coat on to walk out the door.
Sometimes I just keep them.
I'm gonna keep 'em. Please share. All right, so while the tuition report is being passed out, I'll just give the synopsis of the month, for the February 2018 financials. Expenditures for the month of February are $4,288,792.72. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of February were slightly lower at 57.29% of the budget as compared to 58.15% in the prior year. Revenue for the month included $1,274,000 for the excess cost grant, which came in, it represents 74.5% of the eligible grant amount. We'll get a little bit more in depth on excess cost grant in a minute, and Linda can really speak to that very well, but that came in a little bit higher than budgeted, but we anticipate that the next payment will come in lower. Salaries the budget percentage of the budget expended approximates the prior year. Employee benefits is higher than prior year. That's due to a higher workers' comp payment than budgeted, and medical was up due to the timing of the HSA contributions. Purchase services, the amount expended is lower than prior year. Again, a portion of the excess cost grant was applied to this line, as well as the tuition line this year. Supplies came in lower, capital a bit higher, and transportation came in lower, and a portion of that excess cost grant was applied as well. The warrants for the month totaled $1,584,430.93. Questions?
Thank you.
I don't know if Linda wants to speak to the excess cost grant right off the bat, because that was a large payment we received in the month, and there's some significant changes at the state level.
Well, yeah, why don't we do that? Because I was going to have a question on tuition, but you might actually answer that with the...
So the excess cost grant came in at 74.5% of the total amount that we should be receiving from the state. But there's a couple things, that sounds like good news because I had been figuring 70%. Couple things that change that don't make it necessarily such good news. First, the state has already told me that the 74.5% is probably going to go down when we receive our final payment. So they didn't say how much. It could go 70, 72. I'm not sure what the percentage they're going to use for the final payment. The other part that makes this change is that the excess cost is based on our per pupil expenditure, and for the May payment, it's based on updated numbers based on the last audit. So our base amount that we have to pay first before we receive excess cost is going up by about $5,000 a student. So, and let me back up for a second. That is for the locally placed students, not for a DCF placed students. There are a difference. So for most of the students, we only have 3 DCF placed students. For most of the students, we have to pay $5,000 more on the base before we get any excess cost reimbursement. So while I was thinking that we were going to be in really good shape at the excess cost coming in higher, I just don't think it's going to be as high. So I'm still kind of thinking our 70% thereabouts is going to be closer. I recalculated everything based on the information that I received from the state, and it really ends up being a difference of about $50,000 to less than what I was originally planning on getting. So while the 74.5 sounded well, it does bring us closer back down to about the 70% level.
And how is that $5,000 increase calculated?
So they take our per pupil expenditures from based on our audit, what our actual expenditures are, and they come up with a base rate per student, and then we have to pay the first 4.5 times that rate for a locally placed student. For a DCF placed student, the state's supposed to pick up after whatever that per pupil expenditure is, $18,000. We pay the first $18,000. The state's supposed to pay the balance. They were originally going to pay 74.5% of that balance. Now it's going to be a little bit less. We get most of our money at the end of February, get the balance of it at the end of May. So it's the end of May payment that will get adjusted.
So this one's higher than we anticipated, but you're expecting the May payment to be substantially lower.
It should be substantially lower. So it's going to be about $50,000 difference than my original projection. So I don't know if that answers your question, Mike, on tuition and excess cost and.
Maybe it's just because I got back from vacation, I'm still a little foggy. Now I'm just trying to figure out, the 74.5%, you're saying that it's going to go, it's going to be probably more 70, 72. So I'm sorry, is this 74.5% of that 70%? Or it sounds to me like when you were talking about that that we've already reached the eligible grant amount and it is going to be going, almost like we're giving back money. But could you just explain that?
Right.
Again?
So when they calculated the first payment, and so they split up the payment, you get 75% of your total, and this is where it gets confusing. 75% of your total grant in February, 25% in May.
Okay.
When they did the calculations for the February payment, the claims overall across Connecticut came in lower. So everybody got a little bit more. So the percentage came out to everybody's getting 74.5%.
Okay.
But when they get the revised numbers for claims, they expect the claims to go up, which lowers everybody's percentage.
Okay.
And although the law says, as I understand it, the law says you were supposed to get 100% over over the minimum, or 4.5 times what we spend per pupil. Historically, the state has never paid 100%. It's usually been around 70%.
There's, I think, 2 years in the last maybe 15 or 20 that I'm aware of that it's come close to 100%.
So what is that doing to the per student costs that we assume?
So for most of the students, we have to pay the first $80,000, and then the state is supposed to pay the balance but they're only paying 70% of that balance after the $80,000. So we pay $80,000 and then some number more before the state pays the rest.
So if it totals 100 and it's 20 different, then they're going to pay 70% of the 20, as opposed to 100%.
When you do the math, it doesn't seem to work in our favor.
No, it does not.
No, it does not. No, it does not.
Right. So it didn't quite answer the question, but that's okay. There's been talk over the last few months that tuition was trending up, and then when we're looking at the tuition, it says the percent of budget expended is lower than the prior year.
Right.
So the projections of tuition, are they still trending up, and that they're still going that way?
They just passed out the projection or the report for tuition with this projection.
Right.
So we are now projecting that we are going to be 363, which is higher than what you've seen before. The other piece that changes this projection is, in the past, I have listed an amount for excess costs that I thought we would receive for the in-district high-cost students. And the more I thought about it, those students, their expenses aren't tuition. We don't pay tuition for them because it's salaries and contracted services, because they are in-district, not out-of-district. So instead of recording the $70,000 of excess costs that we received for those students under tuition, I moved it over to the contracted services line where their expenses really are, which changed this a little bit as well.
So whether the students in district or out of district, once we hit that 4.5 times, we're still supposed to be reimbursed something from the state, correct? Okay.
Yes.
And just to be clear, this 363 is including the 75,000 budget transfer already?
Yes.
So it's even more than that?
Yes.
Further questions?
Do you know if we'll get any more students who want to join our in-house program? If you don't know, it's okay.
I don't
Just-
know.
Just
I
curious
mean, I
if
don't
they're
know.
already filling out paperwork to do it.
Not that I'm aware of, but
Good.
that always could change.
Who knows, right?
Just like
Get
having-
more students in-house.
I mean, obviously, if they come in this time of the year, it's going to be a prorated tuition, so it's not going to be the same as those.
Okay. I was thinking of next year, but
Yeah, but
I don't know when they sign up.
It could be at any time.
Okay, whenever the need is.
Yeah.
Understood.
I didn't glance at it, but site improvements is pretty much right at max right now.
Yes.
So, was it like that last month too? I didn't, well, actually,
They add 'em
I could
to
look,
the-
I don't think there was any expenses last month, so. Well, there was, very, very minimal.
Yeah, it's,
So it's trended high and it's staying there.
yes, most of that was the avenue renovation that was done
Right.
beginning part of the fiscal year.
Mhm.
There'll be very little that will be done between now and then.
Unemployment seems low. Is that going to continue, or is that going to, is that a timing issue?
No, well, it's been trending low. We just received a bill, it was only $1,000 for the month. We don't pay a flat rate like some businesses do. We pay based on each claim. So thankfully, right now, we don't have anyone collecting. So while you're looking,
Yep,
we
go ahead.
did discuss at the Board of Ed meeting our current projections. So we're factoring in the tuition and everything else that we know that's going on. Our current projection is that we're going to end the year $150,000 to the good at this point. So we will cover this tuition over expenditure, we'll cover the contracted services over expenditure, and still have about $150,000, I hope. Obviously, it's subject to change. We keep getting snowstorms, we keep getting crazy weather. You know, all these things are going to change, but that's where we stand right now.
Our spring athletic teams go off to tournaments all over the state, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's tough being good.
No doubt about it.
Glad they send those buses off wherever they need to go.
Yeah.
Anything on warrants?
Yeah, I had two questions.
Good.
Page 6 and page special services, which is I kind of look at that as it's the other half of special ed, isn't it? So when you see a line like Shipman and Goodwin on page 6 for $4,500 in special services legal fees, what sort of services does that include? What sort?
It's special education related legal services, so it's involving special education students, and I have to be very careful on how I phrase this.
Oh, yeah, claims.
So it's claims, so it could be a mediation on a settlement, it could be some other issue that they're working through, but it's all related to special education students where we have to involve our lawyer.
And when you get a cluster of three figures that give us $50,000 expenditure on page 7, toward the top, special services transportation, are we going over in that line, that area?
Oh, didn't see it here.
Page 7,
Like the 20, yeah.
3 of the 4 top items,
Actually, right now, barring anything.
$50,000.
Anything unexpected happening, I expect special ed transportation to be just slightly under budget.
Right here, page 7, toward the top.
STA.
3 invoices up there that add up to
What's the, your printout looks a little bit different. Maybe it's just the way it came out.
It's STA Guilford. The one expense is 20,106. One's 5,088.
I trust you, Ben, it's just not on ours.
It's at the bottom of page 8.
Bottom of page eight.
It might have been just the way the printout happened. That's
Oh,
all.
yeah, on mine, it's the top of page 7.
Okay, got it.
I think it's the same thing,
Yeah.
20,000, 5,000, and 25,000, okay. Oh, well, don't know how that happens, but it happened.
Yeah, that is weird. Okay. I see it now.
But you're saying that's in line?
Yes. Should be $7,000 under budget.
I don't remember where I read it. It might have been in operations. There was something about including more repair maintenance for the Lathrop house. Did I read that?
Yes, you did.
And I was just wondering,
There was a.
but what by what amount or what caused that?
I believe
Maybe it was just in regular Board of Ed. I'm
I
sorry.
believe there was a comment made by somebody who said that we need to do more maintenance to the outside of the building to make it.
Yes.
I don't
Oh,
think
I
any-
see. Yes.
I don't think any
Thought you
dollar
meant
amount-
something that we had an unplanned expenditure that we were looking at. No, we received a letter saying that Lathrop is unsightly and could be.
Yeah, it was
Right.
the operations meeting.
Yes, I remember. It was a communication that Dr. Balistraci had received, that we should do some maintenance on the landscape as well as Lathrop itself, if I remember correctly. Yeah, putting
Yeah,
more
for-
funds into
More funds for
yeah.
care and maintenance for Lathrop.
Yeah.
House. So
Was there anything at all planned in terms of any encumbrances or anything like that? It just didn't, I'm thinking upkeep of buildings and grounds and,
Right. Well, we
is that
have-
where it would be included?
Right, we have house and grounds
Right.
budgeted, and, that would certainly be included in there. That's the first we've ever heard.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we haven't
About
specifically
it.
budgeted anything that I'm aware of other than trying to do something.
Well, you have to be careful because you do anything to the outside of that building, you have to go through historic
Right,
district.
historic.
Having been former
Yeah.
chair of
Yeah.
that, so I
It was a
I
little
remember what.
unclear. It was a little unclear whether it was mostly about the shrubs and pruning the shrubs,
Okay.
or if it was more about the
So it was just a recommendation from a member of the
concern.
community. Got it. Okay. Okay,
One last thing.
go ahead, Ken.
On the Operations Committee minutes of February 12, item 8, Linda, you're projecting that we're going to be over in tuition. How seriously do you see that?
Those are-
The only specific is VOCAD,
The
That
report
was in
that I
the
gave you
report.
shows $363,000.
363, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else for Christine or Linda? Think we're all set? With that, hear a motion to accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for February 2018 of $4,288,792.72.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, recusals. Okay. Next item, okay, hold on, I gotta do the old iPad thing here. So the next item is consider and take possible action on resolution for bonding items for consideration at the April 10th, 2018 budget referendum. I think that it would just be appropriate for me to read this. It would be a little bit easier so that everyone could hear it. And it's not too long. It's not like some of the ones we've seen where there's 3 or 4 questions. So with the budget, there will be a resolution at the referendum recommending an appropriation and bond authorization of $3,650,000 for upgrades to the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems at Baldwin Middle School and Melissa Jones Elementary School, and future project design costs for various town schools. Resolved, the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Guilford appropriate $3,650,000 for upgrades to the heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems at Baldwin and Melissa Jones, and future project design costs for various town schools. The appropriation may be expended for design, construction, and installation costs, engineering fees, materials, equipment, purchase costs, legal fees, financing costs, interest expense on temporary borrowings, and other costs related to the projects. The appropriation shall include any federal, state, or other grants and aid received for the projects. The Standing Building Committee is authorized to determine the particulars of each of the projects. The Board of Selectmen may reduce or modify the scope of the projects, and the entire appropriation may be expended on the projects as so reduced or modified. No contract may be awarded for any component of the projects until it has been approved by the Board of Selectmen following receipt of a recommendation of the Board of Finance with respect thereto. Further resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town finance the appropriation by issuing the town's bonds, notes, temporary notes, or other obligations in an amount not to exceed $3,650,000 or so much thereof as may be necessary after deducting grants to be received for the projects. So we need to take action on this evening to make sure it gets to bond council to get this all completed and onto the agenda.
I believe we already voted on it.
Yeah.
You voted on the recommendation
Voted
to
on the
move forward with it.
recommendation,
This
not
is
on
the
the-
actual resolution that needs to be approved by you.
Right.
Yeah,
That gave me the authority to move forward with bond counsel to
Right.
produce this piece
right,
of paper.
okay. So bond council's done their job.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And the selectmen had an 8-page resolution, so theirs was not read at the meeting.
Okay.
So I'll move we accept this resolution.
Okay. Okay, got a motion and seconded. Any further discussion?
So while I feel like these purchases for the HVAC systems are very critical and needed, and obviously not a nice to have, I would still prefer that we be a little more conservative about our capital spending and try and just do one major project per year.
Okay. I know you had mentioned that a couple of times during the hearings. I know that.
There's anything on the town side.
There's no questions
No.
on the town.
Right, and
I
that
don't
certainly
think that
helps.
helps.
That certainly, well, it certainly helps, but I also know, just knowing from my background, that it only takes, these systems are incredibly old, and I think we've heard it numerous times that I don't think the schools can really support having another year or two, and if anything did happen, the cost is going to be, it's going to skyrocket to do the repairs after the
We had
fact.
testimony at our hearing that just this winter alone, the systems at both schools had broken down at least 2 or 3 times. So I
With no
think,
parts.
it's, yeah.
Right.
So I think it's, we really need to move this forward.
Yeah, and understanding, the situation, I think this is a prudent way of getting these projects done. So, okay, we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Abstentions? Okay. We have, next item, consider and take possible action on the investment policy. Mary Jane.
I would just like to say that this is a first draft of an investment policy for the town. The selectmen did have it on their agenda this morning. They have requested that it be passed through our town council for review on some particular items within here. So really just looking if you have any immediate typos, changes, edits, or whatever that you think necessary before it gets reviewed by town council. Certainly is not something we're looking for you to vote on today. We
Right.
will, eventually it will come to you and/or the Board of Selectmen, depending on how that works, with a final a final draft. But welcome to review it at your leisure. Send me comments and questions at my office. You know,
I just
as
have
we go forward.
one I guess, question or comment, and that is we refer in the document to a treasurer, and the town of Guilford no longer has a treasurer, so the wording will probably need to be changed.
I left it in as treasurer only because the charter designates the finance director as treasurer. But it could be changed to finance director / treasurer, finance director. Absolutely, we could change that wording, but that was the reason why I left it in as treasurer. At the very beginning, I make note of section 6-3 of the charter. But certainly that's a small, small item. We could decide.
It's more of a
I think I do
clarification.
remember that language in the charter, though, right? You're sort of designated as the treasurer.
Right. So my title is finance director / treasurer. So that could certainly be the wording in there.
Acting as the town treasurer, it doesn't mean she is the town treasurer. It's
It says she's authorized to act as.
Yeah. Just a comment.
Absolutely
But,
fine.
but again, it refers to the town charter, which talks about the town treasurer, so it's basically equalizing them, but there is an authorization to act.
I
So
believe I took the wording directly from the charter, but I will double check that to be sure.
This is a about 7-page document draft. Haven't fully gotten into it yet. I don't know if anybody has any further questions, or I know that one of the members of our board is not here tonight. He wasn't able to make it the last minute, and he did send an email to all of us regarding the investment policy, and I know he was involved in putting this together. Was he not? Was this something that he was? No.
This is Mary Jane's document. Make no mistake about it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, no, it hasn't had any input from the board in general. I thought that there was some discussion about this policy coming forward, and Mr. McKenzie being involved in it in some way.
Mr. McKenzie?
She drafted it.
Oh, yeah, drafted. This is your, I understand this is the
I think she
document
did
you put
it
together.
solely
Yeah.
by her.
Mr. McKenzie was invited to help us establish the parameters under which we could make the investments, and to demonstrate the efficacy of his position, that we could substantially increase the investment income. To date, he has yet to provide that spreadsheet, which would show the twice-a-year cash inflow of nearly $45 million, how we would be able to invest that in longer-term securities, most likely T-bills, how much we could put aside for up to, I think he used the term 3-month T-bills several times, how much we could actually allocate to that, knowing that we have $7 million a month in expenditures. So by the time we have the $45 million at the end of July or early August, we will have already expended $7 million. And if we were to lock up money for 3 months, during that 3-month period, you would anticipate spending another $21 million, which means 28 of that 45 is unavailable for any long-term investment, particularly on a 3-month term. That doesn't mean we can't do things on a 1 or a 2-year and some kind of analysis to that degree. But the possibility of allocating $25 or $30 million to 3-month T-bills just doesn't exist. So we'll work with Mr. McKenzie to demonstrate what is in fact possible given the outflows that we have and projected interest rates. And Mary Jane, you mentioned earlier, STIF is now paying at what?
I believe last I looked it was 1.47.
And I think Ken mentioned that 3-month T-bills are at 1.5. Isn't that what he mentioned during the discussion?
Yeah, that was what I was alluding to about
Right.
stiff investments, is that, they're backed by Standard & Poor's, they're AAA rated, they're guaranteed. I mean, I would like to hear from Mr. McKenzie his feelings, the difference, how he feels about STIF as opposed to T-bills.
Right. And I think it's clearly evident that we could probably commit between 10 to 15 million to some kind of long-term, to a 3-month commitment. I think that's it's infinitely doable. And now, yeah, I think we're gonna back down from his $200,000 to $300,000 in investment income because you're shortening the amount of available capital you're going to be invested in that T-bill. But it's clearly worth the effort, and we will work that analysis with Mr. McKenzie, as he had volunteered to do so.
Is it possible also to consider investing money into T-bills on a rolling basis as it's coming in for the first month or so?
When you say rolling basis, what are you talking about?
As far as instead of one major purchase at the end of August, perhaps just as revenues coming in throughout July.
Could be.
To roll.
I'm actually looking at a laddered approach.
Yeah.
Yep.
In that way, to have 3, 5, 6 months.
Why not?
So,
an extra 10,000.
Exactly.
You know, it always helps, right?
So that we can be liquid when we need it, and still have the flexibility of some longer term. So that's what I'm looking into at the moment.
Why don't we communicate with Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chairman, and ask him to prepare such a spreadsheet for our consideration at next month's meeting?
He's committed to working with Mary Jane to do that. I don't think you need an official board proclamation to ask him to do that.
I brought all this up, and I'm mistaken on the involvement, but when I saw the consider and take possible action, and I knew that Mr. McKenzie was not going to be here, we can certainly have discussion about it, but I wouldn't want to make any further action without the full board here, so we can look at the investment policy and we could work out whatever discussions or thoughts that we have. So
we apologize for the wording on your agenda. That is a rather standard way we describe things. We never intended for this policy to be approved by either the Board of Selectmen this morning or you this evening. It still hasn't been run by legal yet, so it was never intended for action this evening.
That's
Right.
good.
Like I said, it's purely my first draft of it. To both boards.
Again, with the draft on there, it's pretty clear, and we've had numerous things that agenda items that consider and take possible action, like our first workshop, budget workshop, that we didn't take action that night. So it happens quite frequently. So
it's there just in case.
Good. No, I totally understand.
One thing that was pointed out at this morning's meeting is, as we look at the investment objectives and the 3 objectives, and they are specifically put in this order: safety, liquidity, and yield. So yield is at the bottom of that priority.
And that's my concern.
Exactly.
Is the safety.
Correct.
So.
I just wanted to say that I feel really positive about this. I mean, I just think this is a win-win situation for taxpayers. And, I do thank Mr. McKenzie for really bringing it to our attention and pushing us in this direction.
Mary Jane.
Oh,
We should
yes,
thank
absolutely.
Mary Jane as well.
And as I mentioned last week, your board has the opportunity, if we act on this relatively quickly, prior to setting the mill rate at the successful conclusion of a referendum, you would have the ability to adjust the anticipated revenues. So you could actually impact the anticipated mill rate when you go to set that, reflecting higher interest income.
And I would just like to note that the investment policy is not a requirement for us to do that. I just think it's important that everybody knows how we plan to invest our money, and that we all have a hand in saying how that's done. So that's why I felt that the first step was the policy.
And we've had policies for other items that are important. Capital bonded projects, we have a policy for that or guideline that we've used. We had the unassigned fund, building up the fund balance. So there's been policies we've had, and having this investment policy, I think, is
It's a standard policy I've had in other communities. So.
Yep.
One other consideration you'll note while you read through this as to who is the authoritative body, who's the legislative body for this policy, whether it is the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen, or a combination of both if we see fit to do it that way. We will be talking with council to determine who has the statutory and or charter authority to create this policy. Because I think you're familiar with, the Board of Finance has a set of regulations and policies in place. This could clearly be added to that as well, if it is in fact determined that you have the authority over this policy.
And what is the extension of such policy when it gets drafted to the pension committee?
This has no bearing
No
whatsoever
bearing
on the pension at
whatsoever
all.
on that.
None. No.
That's its own
Pension committee has their own
review
set of
criteria,
Right,
so-
correct.
That's a substantial area.
Yeah.
Right.
But
No.
they have the authority over that, we have the authority over the operating funds.
Okay. Wanted to get that on the record.
Something that was said that was very important, though, that I just want to recap is, because I'm thinking about the timing of all this. So our next meeting falls after the budget referendum, but we have to set the mill rate within, is it 7 days? Was it 7 days or 10 days of a referendum passing? 10 days. Usually we do it within 4 or 5. So, but you mentioned that we don't have to have this necessarily in place. It's good to have this and we can make adjustments, but this doesn't have to be in place to be able
Absolutely
to
not.
affect any change. And I think that's a very important point to make, because when you were talking about the dates, and I want to make sure that that's not the case with the policy, that we'd have to have it.
But the analyses and the projected potential revenues needs to be done prior to you setting that mill rate.
Right, right.
The vote is on the 10th of April, and our next meeting is something like the 18th, 19th, something like that.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. Okay. Next item is committee reports. So based on the agenda, any questions on the building permits? I always like to see where it trends, and right now we're possibly going to go over what we were last year, so that's a good thing.
By a hairbreadth.
By a little, by a little.
Public forum. we have
Okay.
somebody here.
Old business, new business, public forum. Public forum? And you probably know it's name and address for the viewing audience and for us.
I don't, but thank you.
Okay.
My name is Brian Wiley. My address is 69 Davis Drive. Two areas I'd like to, I guess, ask and address briefly. The first one, this is actually my first time at Board of Finance meeting. I was listening to the conversation about the investment policy. Just to understand from what First Selectman Hoey mentioned, this is a possibility of investing on the order of $20 million for a period of 6 months, which would give a similar return to $10 million if it were invested over a year. The difference would be possibly 1.47% versus 1.5% on an annualized basis.
Those are the numbers right now.
Okay, so roughly speaking.
Roughly.
So that would be 1.47% of, or 1.5% of $10 million is about $150,000 versus $147,000 return? Correct. Okay. It would seem like people might want to give careful consideration to forecasting interest rates 3 or 4 months out in this sort of environment and wanting to adjust our budgets or spend a lot of time on the $3,000 additional return that might happen if all rates stayed fixed. And last time I heard on Bloomberg Radio, rates were probably not going to stay fixed. So the difference between the stiff and the 3-month T-bills might not stay at 0.03% for the duration of the calendar year. Just a thought. The other thing was I just wanted to thank the board as a parent of a child who went through Adams when there were and still are significant HVAC issues, and the parent of a child who's about to enter Adams. From the standpoint of a parent who's heard enough about some of the issues and been concerned enough from a health standpoint for my children, from an expense standpoint for the school budget, since things that are decaying and falling apart and have to be retrofitted in the short run generally increase operating expenses very significantly, especially in physical plants. I don't know if that was worked into the considerations. It sure should have been. That savings of expense is something that I'm very happy that the board has elected to do something about now, in addition to protecting the children and protecting the town from the legal risks of not just catastrophic physical plant events, but significant health problems that some kids might have that could be traced back to inadequate HVAC. It's adequate now, barely, but thank you very, very much for having the common sense to fix something that was broken a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah.
Not going to exit.
But just to clarify on the bonding, right?
Yeah, come on up, Christine.
But just quickly, the capital bonding expenditures that were approved tonight are for HVAC at Baldwin and Melissa Jones. Adams is in the long-term capital bonding plan, and so that will, eventually come before the Board of Finance also, and hopefully as soon as next year. But currently the plan is. Okay.
Not fixed yet.
First of all, your comments are still very much appreciated. Thank
Yes,
you.
they
But come on up. I don't see anybody.
Let me
else
just
waiting
say, okay. Thank you for what you're doing. Please keep it up quickly. If Adams isn't yet about to be fixed. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think I would just comment. Well, first of all, I mean, there's a lot of people to thank. On that. Board of Education, bring it to our attention and doing all the work in the building committee, obviously, stand building committee overseeing these projects. But I believe that, with Adams being on the docket to be done within the next couple of years, I mean, Baldwin and Jones were the ones that were the absolute priority. And Adams we had touched, and I remember as a liaison to the building committee and watching and hearing about the HVAC at Adams, yes, it was fixed to a certain extent, but nowhere near where it needed to be. But Baldwin and Jones are in desperate, critical need. And so Adams is right behind it. So, and I know we'll be getting that shortly, so next year or two. Yes?
Mr. Chairman, I'm surprised. I thought this board might be curious to ask a question of myself and Christine Cohen from the Board of Education where we went when you asked us to make $250,000 in cuts on both budgets. I didn't know if that was, I think we had forwarded to you, I believe we had forwarded, have we forwarded yet to them? We will be forwarding to you tomorrow the updated sheets on where the Board of Selectmen made their cuts. And I think you made yours this evening, right? We did. So.
Thank you for that. I know that the Board of Education met tonight, right, to vote on it. So it crossed my mind asking, but I know with both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education both meeting, I didn't want to put one ahead of the other, so I figured we would do it, at our next meeting and discuss that at more length. But
well, you'll have our revisions tomorrow morning.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Your next meeting is after the referendum.
Oh,
That's true.
Yes, it is after the referendum.
Which is April 10th.
With an annual town meeting on April 3rd. So, great. Anything further in public forum? Okay. If not, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you.